Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and we are back with arguably, in a long time, the most eagerly awaited episode of Game of Thrones. I also want to say I correctly predicted the title of this episode last week. It was going to be called The Long Night, and it is indeed called The Long Night. This is episode 3 of season 8, the final season of Game of Thrones. We're 3 weeks away from the ending now. And this was like what it was all teeing up for. This is arguably what all the seasons have been building to since season 1, since the opening scene of season 1.
Yeah.
And certainly the last 2 episodes of this season has been all build up, and this was our payoff. Now, was this payoff satisfying? That is what we're going to be discussing on today's show. It's a very, self-contained episode, again, to one location predominantly. And we're just going to go through all the character moments. We're going to talk about all the major hitters of this episode, all the things that went down, and whether we liked or didn't like this episode.
So before we start, even though we know what the names of the episode titles are, and even though we know kind of what the final episode is going to be called, A Song of Ice and Fire, I want to go ahead and say this now. And it's something that I want to be quite clear on when reviewing this episode. I want to say that this series is called Game of Thrones, and the book series is called A Song of Ice and Fire. Mm-hmm. Now, George R. R. Martin has already said the ending to the show is going to be quite different to the ending of the books. I think whatever happened in this episode, whatever we get in the books, it's going to be completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, beyond completely different. This is very much for the show's purpose, and the entire purpose of the show is who's going to sit on the Iron Throne at the end, not who's going to even survive until the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a comment on another review of a film that we've done recently, where I don't think that they were brutal enough with their character deaths for long-beloved characters.
And does that carry over into this episode
that
as well?
Does very much carry over to this episode. Game of Thrones went a little bit weak at the knees here.
Very weak at the knees.
For character deaths.
You, and I think the entire fan base were predicting that half the core cast was going to get called this episode.
I think there was a lot of things. There was a lot of things that we could have predicted, and a lot of things we couldn't predict from this episode. I just want to say that I got the crypts right, at least.
Yeah.
And that was about it. I mean, I would want to go and rewrite parts of this episode. I enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it. But at the same time, thematically going forwards, I think there could have been a lot of differences they made to this episode.
I think they should have just rewritten the entire episode, or at least get D&D out, because they can't write at all. It is D&D, right? Or DMV?
No, Benioff and Wise. They didn't write for this episode. They didn't write for this episode.
They did.
Did they write for this episode?
This episode was written exclusively by them. They didn't direct it. It was directed by the guy who directed Hard Home and another episode, which is escaping me. But no, this was D&D that wrote this one. And oh boy, does it show. This is I said this before we went live, this is my Beyond the Wall episode this season. Beyond the Wall was season 7 episode, which I couldn't stand and had many problems with, and I thought it was written so poorly and all the decisions that were made were dumb. This is going to be my review of this episode, and I plan to tear almost everything down about this episode, maybe apart from one thing, which I thought was actually very well handled, which you know what that is. We know what that is. We've got the plan right here. We know what that scene is. But before we get into this episode, this is a segment I want to open up now, if we do get comments at the start of every show. Tate, you had a comment. We had a comment on our last video, and I want to open this segment up. So if you guys have any comments, any questions you want to ask us, please do drop them in the comment section down below, and we'll be sure to read them out and answer them at the beginning of each stream here on in. So this is a question from, I'm going to try and Andrew Cates. Question for Cinema Savvy: the Night King versus Thanos, and I guess that's very topical as of late.
Thanos,
so,
easy.
Yeah, absolutely,
very easy,
absolutely.
Like even in single-handed combat, Thanos would just like absolutely mince through any of the whites that are surrounding the White Walkers. Thanos for sure, definitely.
You know what? Before I saw this episode, I might have given the edge to the Night King a little bit. He's kind of like this imposing guy, seemingly indestructible unless you have certain specific things, which Thanos wouldn't have any knowledge of. The Night King could just turn Thanos into a White Walker. Having seen this episode, Thanos takes the win instantly. And that's your answer. I'm sorry if it was a bit on the nose, a bit short.
He wouldn't have to click, he'd just have to breathe.
We're getting some people in the comments now too. We've got JX Editor, we've got Claudia.
Versus Palpatine, Steve would win.
So Claudia says, I don't blame the director at all. There were many beautiful shots. And this is a good, actually, starting point, I think, before we get into the actual episode itself. Visually, now, we were talking about this before. You said that you could see the episode absolutely fine on your TV. I know that George also had the same thing. He could see it perfectly. My TV, a lot of what I'm seeing from people on the internet and people in general, basically saw a black screen for an hour and 20 minutes. The visuals were so hard to see what I was watching. I had my TV on full brightness. I've got a 4K TV.
I'm wondering if they'll fix that when it comes out on DVD.
I really hope so. I don't think they will, because they've pretty much just been... I've got the Blu-rays of all the series, and they've pretty much just been as they were screened.
I know,
it
but
might be slightly clearer.
I will say this, even though I've been able to see every episode, this is probably the darkest episode they filmed.
Yeah. And, you know,
even watchers on the wall, you could see things fully lit up, but there was a lot of fire involved in that. This episode is very dark because of some of the events that take place, and I'm completely okay with that. Best way of explaining it is, even though some people couldn't see the screen, I'll tell you now, from the people who I've spoken to who had a legitimate way of watching it, they had absolutely no issues. It's only the people who have streamed it, from what I know, who have had issues themselves. Not only that, but if you want a battle at night against an enemy that you can't really see the full numbers of, and you can't really see the full impact of, especially with that opening Dothraki charge. Like, it's good that you couldn't see them until literally the last second. And the use of darkness in this episode provided a lot of tension, a lot of kind of good moments just through the use of that lighting. So I wouldn't go too harsh on the lighting. I know that some people weren't able to see the episode. And
had this have been the first time that we'd ever seen the White Walkers in combat, the darkness would have been very effective. My opinion is, what's the point? We know what the White Walkers are. We
didn't see any of the White Walkers in combat. This is the Whites we're talking about. Well, and a lot of the characters haven't seen the Whites. You have to remember that. So the Dothraki hadn't seen the Whites. So what do they see when they run into them? They just see just a mountain of people running at them.
I'll concede the point to that, but also let's go to arguably the biggest and most prolific and incomparable night fantasy combat scene of all time, Helm's Deep. That is shot at night. Now, yes, you do have like the moonlight, but you can see everything crystal clear in that.
But it's a very blue tinge to that. This is a very dark, and it's the kind of tinge that we haven't seen a blue night tinge in Game of Thrones. The only things that we have seen as far as night scenes and night battles is the Watchers on the Wall episode. So it's pointless comparing it to Helm's Deep for lighting wise.
No, but I mean, you've got a night battle. Like, I'm not saying whack a blue filter over it. I'm saying light your goddamn scene. This is an episode where they've gone all in, you know, all their CGI budget's gone into this one episode. You've got scenes of spectacle, which you can't see because it's too dark. So you can't even take in the spectacle of the scene. It's edited so frenetically. The camera is so close and invasive in the battle. And it's at night. And it's in the middle of a blizzard. You may as well just be listening to the audio from it. There were scenes where characters were fighting.
Here's the question. How exactly do you light correctly without it looking ridiculous? A dark area with a blizzard. Like, yeah, dude, you have to actually think about it.
JXC's just put Blackwater was at night. I could see Blackwater perfectly.
But Blackwater wasn't in a blizzard. Also, Blackwater
don't shoot your scene in a blizzard. You know what I mean?
Blackwater did also have that whole wildfire thing, which kind of lit most of the scenes, gave it off a power.
You had Dragonfire in this one, which was great. In fact, I welcomed the dragons torching the ground because at least it provided a little bit of light so I could kind of see what was going on. I think they really dropped the ball on this episode. Writing is a whole other thing, and we're going to get into that in a very short while with all the character moments. But from a visual standpoint, this is where you want to take in the spectacle. You've got dragons fighting dragons. They're in a whirlwind of a blizzard of CGI and pixels and clouds, and you just can't make out anything. You can't sit back and take in those breathtaking shots. When that scene where the Dothraki are charging over the plains, and it's from the walls, and it's Daenerys and Jon, and you're watching all these lights drifting over the thing, I could barely see that. It's scenes like that you want to take in, and I have to imagine the reason.
I will say, for a person who could actually see the episode, that entire scene was phenomenal, and the pure reason why I say that was because you could see all of the lights, going across the field, and as soon as they hit the other end, you could see the lights going out, and that was clear as day on my screen. So
I knew that was happening, but I was literally. People say this episode was like on the edge of your seat. I was on the edge of my seat purely because I was trying to lean into the TV more to see this goddamn screen.
Yeah.
The only reason I can think of that they did that, like, I get the point of wanting to shoot it at night and to have it in a blizzard because the White Walker's there. I get it, but it doesn't make, if you can't light it effectively to simulate that, then it doesn't make for a good visual of the screen. The only reason I can think of that they did that is because whilst it's still incredible for TV and the things that they managed to pull off in this episode, it is still inherently TV, and they will not have the same budget as they would for a feature film. You can't render entire armies in backgrounds constantly. That eats up a lot of rendering time, therefore meaning a lot of money.
I'll say, because the complaint that you're having here, that you weren't able to see most of the episode, the problem is, and I'll keep on going back to it, and I feel like we should probably move on from this, is the fact that I could see the episode, and I know a lot of people who could also appreciate and see the episode. So maybe it is a fault on Game of Thrones' part, because parts of the episode were quite dark for me as well on both viewings, because I watched it on my computer. I also watched it on the TV downstairs.
I think that's been a factor that's been increasing the last few series, certain particular dark scenes. But
they've been relying a little bit more on natural lighting. Throughout the last few series, they've been relying more on candlelight and stuff like that, and maybe that is the downfall of this episode. However, I have to say, on both watchings, I could see and at least make out what was happening on screen without having to have my face attached to the screen.
We'll move on now, but Claudia does say, could it be that maybe the budget wasn't actually enough and they chose darkness to mask the bad CGI? That's what I'm thinking. If you make the entire screen dark, you obscure the background completely, you'll have a couple of bits of CGI there, but you predominantly focused on the main actors in the foreground in costume and everything like that. That's what I'm guessing. But anyway, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the episode now. I did just want to bring that up first.
We can't exactly do it how we normally do, and I feel like this is going to be a recurring theme throughout the episodes. Hopefully next episode it will change again so we can do the north-south divide.
Did you geographically plot the most northern part of the battle?
I tried to. I really wanted to. But if we're geographically plotting different areas, then we'd start with where the actual episode ended, with the Night King being killed. So what we did was we kind of went with key events, because it's very difficult with this episode. There is a lot of battle, which we can't really talk about. The choreography was excellent. I just want to put that out there for the episode. The choreography, the fighting itself. I know that you didn't like it so much because you thought it was just a hack and slash fest. If you actually look intricately at the choreography and stuff like that, I mean, I watched the behind the scenes immediately afterwards, and I appreciated it a lot more. The amount of time and effort each individual extra was put through certain bits of choreography to make it look absolutely spectacular. So just want to say that was excellent that they got that through. So we're actually going to be starting with the very, very tense first 10 minutes of the episode before the battle, where barely a single word is spoken, and it's just people getting prepared and looking out into the distance.
Yeah, I mean,
that's it.
This bit did remind. I'm going to throw a lot of comparisons there to Helm's Deep. It reminded me of Helm's Deep, which also starts off in silence, just the ambience, the audio, the slowly, the sound of the army slowly getting louder and louder, the sound of the rain. I know this one wasn't set in rain, but it did remind me of that. You need that. If this had thrown you straight into the action, you don't get that build up. That's fine. We're going to get on to the next, that's honestly the bit that I don't have a problem with in the episode. It's literally like the first 5 or 10 minutes of the episode. After that, I have a problem with pretty much every other thing that happens, which we're going to get into with the return of the return
of the Red Woman. She is back for one episode and one episode only.
And does sweet FA the entire
No, she brings so much to this.
What does she bring, Tate?
She gives hope to the entire people. She sets Arya on her mission towards the end of the episode and reaffirms what she must do, and basically reveals the entire plot to the rest of the episode.
Wouldn't Arya have tried to do that anyway without her saying?
No, she wouldn't have. She would have stayed in the room with the Hound and tried to defend it. Instead, she went and she knew she had to go after the Night King. She knew where the Night King was going to be, so that fulfilled her destiny. Also, very, very, very key to mention as well, because we will get around to it in a minute, but she does kill the Night King in this episode. That's the blue eyes. She has closed brown eyes in the past. Doesn't Cersei have green eyes?
I thought it was going to be in order that she has killed people. I was thinking the waif. Did the waif have green eyes?
I believe brown eyes. It was brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes in the order that she said. So green eyes is the last to kill.
When did Melisandre first tell her that? Was that back in season 3?
That was back in season
where she was with the Brotherhood.
Maybe 2, 3. End of season 2, start of season 3.
2, she was in Harrenhal. I think she didn't meet Melisandre until season 3.
Season 3. Yeah.
I'd have to go back. I didn't watch like a previously on Game of Thrones, so I couldn't even remember that being told to Arya way back when.
And
go on, sorry.
I'll tell you now, and I completely agree with Claudia in the comments. Melisandre was a boss. I mean, she lit all the swords. She managed to...
extinguished in the next scene.
What did she bring? What did she bring to it? She lit the trench.
Have they never heard of oil and fire and flaming arrows? And...
Dude, did you not see the flaming arrows they fired in the episode?
You mean to tell me that they couldn't light that? They couldn't send one guy out?
No, what they were saying is the only two. No, what they were saying was no fire could light the trench because the White Walkers were blocking it. So the only thing that could be done was the Lord of Light or the dragons could light the trench. Those are the only two things.
Yeah, and they had 2 dragons.
The 2 dragons at the time were fighting things, dude.
Okay, I want to bring this up. The dragons started fighting stuff at the end. What did Jon
They were fighting. There was a scene where they were fighting the ice dragon, and that's when they were trying to light the trench, which is why Davos couldn't wave in the dragons because they were lost in the storm trying to fight the other ice dragon.
What did Jon and Daenerys do this episode? For the first part, they thought, "Fuck that battle, we're just."
Jon and Daenerys' plan was that they would sit on top, wait for the Night King to come out, and then attack. Problem was Daenerys got very attached to the Dothraki and went after and chased after them. So Jon had to follow suit because otherwise everyone would get killed.
See, Claudia's put in the comments. Chris? Did you not see the beautiful shot of the blades being lit up? It was a great shot, but why did it stop at swords? Why couldn't she light everyone's sword on fire? Why couldn't she light every arrow, every spear, everything? And I mean, they set up that all their swords are on fire. That's awesome. That's cool. They're extinguished in the very next scene, so she does sweet FA in that first part. Also, that brings me on to my next point. Now, I'm not a military tactician, but you have the Dothraki, who are a cavalry force, who obviously you send in first as a hard-hitting force. Why do you send them into infinite pitch black where you can't see your enemy? Please explain to me.
I'll tell you now. Tactically, they weren't meant to charge. They charged because they got a little bit overhyped. And George just went, fuck it, I'll go with them, see what we can do. So it's the whole thing with the Dothraki not being able to control them. But
Brinsley's just put... Go on, sorry. Go on.
I'll tell you now, this episode, Chris, I know you don't like it, but this episode does make sense thematically. And it does make sense somewhat. The tactics in the episode are crap.
Yes.
But that's because everything falls to pieces the second the Dothraki charge, the second they get too excited. Now, Melisandre could probably predict the future. She probably knows what's happening, which is why she's able to tell Arya what she's meant to do, which is why she knows she's going to be dead by the end of the night. So she already knows what happens. So she knows by sending Dothraki in, that will cause the army of the dead to charge at the main members of the cast, shall we say. The battle does make sense, Chris. It does make sense. I have
so many problems.
It doesn't make sense to you. Maybe you should watch it again for a second or third.
No, I can think of nothing worse than watching this episode again.
It is an episode which does make sense, and it is a cool episode to watch in general.
Does it make sense, though?
It does make sense, Chris. It really does make sense.
Brinsley's just put in the comments, Chris is being too harsh. Oh, boy. Yes, you haven't seen anything yet. We haven't even got into the majority.
I mean, we spoke about this beforehand, and boy, oh, boy, you have no idea what you guys are getting yourselves into by saying Chris is thinking this is too harsh.
Let's
move on. So, holding the line, I thought the Grey Worm was dead here. I thought he was in the front row, but apparently he wasn't.
Yeah, again, like I couldn't even. Did he make it out of this episode? I couldn't.
Yes, he did. He did make it out of this episode
because there was a guy that was dressed in the unsullied armor that came alive at the end with blue eyes. I didn't know if that was Grey Worm or if that was just another soldier. I don't know. This is what I mean. This episode was so disorientating. I couldn't even tell who was alive.
So let's go to things that we could actually see and make out. Dolorous Ed's death. He died sacrificing himself as Sam. It was the first character death of the episode, and I think we could all safely say that we knew that Dolorous Ed wouldn't make it through the episode. He wouldn't make it through the season. As far as his character contributions, he is now no longer the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. What does that mean for all the characters left alive? Well, I've already said with two theories, you've got two senses of irony here. You could either have Jaime taking the black and leading the Night's Watch once the Game of Thrones is over, if he survives, or an even bigger sense of irony is having Tormund leading the Night's Watch, which would have been, if now knowing that he survived, having a wildling being the person running the wall now would be very interesting. Or does that mean that because the White Walkers are through the wall, they're no longer a threat? Is there a need for the Night's Watch anymore?
Well, what I was going to suggest was, first off, we talk about holding the line with the Unsullied outside with spears. I think it would have been a better plan if, and maybe this would have drawn too many comparisons to Helm's Deep. There's no point having your infantry outside like your best warriors. The best plan for them would be to shoot a bunch of arrows out into the crowd of the White Walkers coming, light the trenches, catapults and everything like that, dragons, all that good stuff, and keep your enemy inside Winterfell. Winterfell is a stronghold. It can be fortified. It can be barricaded. Now, again, that might be too close to Helm's Deep. If you then funnel the White Walkers through the gates of, this is like 300 now, if you funnel them through the gates, maybe over the wall, you can pick them off easier than meeting them in open field. That's my opinion on it. But anyway, Dolores' death, this is, first off, I knew this death was coming. We'll get into it later in the episode, but most of the characters that die in this episode are kind of just your secondary characters, maybe with the exception of perhaps two of them.
Yeah.
I could probably extend it to one, but maybe two. A problem that I had with this episode, and this went all the way throughout the episode, and it's kind of down to the editing and just the characters' abilities in the field. First off, Sam being onset by White Walkers. He would be dead in a heartbeat. You see the sheer volume of numbers, and these are some of my favorite bits in the episode, actually, where as a viewer, you do kind of get this sense of overwhelm from the sheer amount of, these aren't stopping.
Ridiculous number
in the episode where the Whites are laying down their lives quite literally on a bed of fire for the rest of the ranks to walk over them. This is the kind of force we're dealing with right here.
It's unlimited resources, and the only reason why he survived this episode was because Dolores Ed gave his life for him. In fact, that could be said for a couple of characters, because all the characters sacrificed something, except for one towards the end, which was more of going out in a blaze of glory. But all of the major character deaths here, they all sacrificed something they've always been looking out for throughout the entire season, or something that at least links them to the person they saved. And the person who they saved obviously will have a larger role in the plot to come. With Sam, I mean, he is the information person. I think I read somewhere online and I saw loads of people comparing this. Sam had actually looked through the ancient history of Valyrian steel and different swords and stuff like that, and found Arya's knife in the last series, which could have led to a link of, oh, okay, so that knife's very old and very important. But from this episode, Dolores Ed's death, it didn't hit me at all, not even slightly.
And here's the thing.
I don't know if it would have, if it was a sad kind of him being stabbed to death, sacrificing himself for a larger character, or whether it would have meant more if he was given a bit more of a runoff, like with Pip and Gren at the Watchers on the Wall episode, which, by the way, is in my top 3 Game of Thrones episodes of all time. I think it's underrated. With those deaths, they hit hard. In fact, every death in that episode really did hit hard, especially with Ygritte's death towards the end. This episode did cut back on the feelings that you'd get from each death, apart from one.
Exactly. This episode, and I'm going to go on a bit of a tirade here. Brinsley says it best. The plot armor is strong. Now, when Game of Thrones first started out, when it was following the books, and this is why I always praise season 1 and the character of Ned Stark serving as not just a very well-written character, but also as a plot device for the future of the series of A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. With Ned Stark's death, you're in a realm, you're in a series where anyone at any point can die. No one is safe. Anyone can literally go at the flip of a dime. This is no longer that show. The amount of times in this episode, and this is not just guilty of Game of Thrones, it's guilty of a lot of films specifically, and it's a trope that I always hate. Characters about to die, they're about to die, all hope is lost, and then boom, last second a character will come in and save them. And that happened so much in this episode that whenever a character was in peril, I didn't feel like they were, because I knew someone was going to save them.
The next death on the list is Lyanna Mormont. Talk about a young actress going out in one of the greatest blazes of glory I've seen.
That was a cool death. That was a cool moment. I did like her
death. And she isn't really a major character. She's become more of like a reoccurring kind of side character from the latest series, but she has been a badass character. And with a character who's always been very badass with her words, it was great to see her go out in a physical kind of way by taking down a giant. In
a very brutal way as well.
Very
like
brutal
the sound effect where she gets crushed, like that was also. I love the look of the undead giant as well. I really did like that. I think like her death, Lyanna Mormont, I did like her death, and I like that she went out strong to the end and actually managed to take it down in her dying breath. A lot of the deaths in this episode felt very detached to me, which is not what I was expecting from the setup we'd had for the previous 2 episodes. I was expecting a very emotional response to this episode, and it just didn't go those places to me at all. Most of the episode is characters that we've seen filmed from a distance, just hacking at White Walkers. There are no character moments. There are very few character moments in this episode. Theon really only gets it.
One of the best character moments in this episode comes from the Hound, actually.
Yeah, but he doesn't do anything. Like they set up that as a great thing, and then
it comes into a redemption arc purely because he is now protecting Arya. There was no one else in his mind. He's finally got something to protect in this world, and we know that he survived. So of course, Clegane Bowl is going to happen. But I was really disappointed that he didn't pick up the flaming sword.
Yeah, but that moment you mentioned there was a great moment, like seeing Clegane, whether it's from the White Walkers, the overwhelm of the amount of
fire,
battle
and everything like that. It was like he was reliving Blackwater.
And that was one of my favorite moments from Blackwater. Those are the moments of this episode. They're very few and far between that I remember. Those short little bits of character moments. You can't pace a battle. I mean, you can, but it's not going to have the same impact. You can't pace a battle based on. We've literally there's got to be like turns in the battle. There's got to be objectives for groups of characters or individual characters in the battle. If you are just passively watching people hacking at zombies for an hour, which this episode very much felt like to me, I tuned out about 20 minutes into this episode.
The next actual scene we're going to be moving on to is, well, we actually missed the dragon fight scene, so we'll go back to that.
That was cool. From what I could see, it was. I mean, I can see it very clearly on my screen, but dragons fighting dragons is cool. Like, kind of reminded me of Godzilla a little bit.
And even though I like the fact that it was in the blizzard and everything like that, and it was cool in that sense, I kind of want to now see a dragon battle in the open. And maybe we'll get that in one of the Game of Thrones spin-off shows if they ever do the Dance with Dragons. That would be incredible to actually watch dragons fighting and dueling. But that scene is being expected, and in fact, they managed to win. I'm not sure what cost they managed to win. Not sure if all the dragons made it out alive. I know that the ice dragon's dead now.
Did that actually? Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry. It was Rhaegal, I think it was later on in the episode where it's getting stabbed up. Or was that Drogon?
That was Drogon.
I thought one of them went down, but I can't tell. I don't know if both of them are still there.
I think from the trailer to next episode we see both of them still alive, but I think both of them look injured.
Yeah.
In a sense of it.
Later, I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead here where Drogon's getting stabbed up.
I'll tell you now, this episode was, you could just mix it all
chaotic.
Up together.
The review's going to completely emulate the episode. Where the White Walkers are stabbing Drogon up, I thought it was established in a previous season, I might be wrong about this, where people are firing arrows at the dragons and they're just bouncing off, they're not doing any damage. Would skeletons with little blunt swords really do much damage to a dragon?
I'm not sure whether it'd be more of an annoyance, and I'm not sure whether Drogon was getting stabbed and getting hurt because of it, or maybe he was more concerned about getting them off so they didn't get to Dany. So in the end, he decided to get Dany off the dragon and fly off and try and get rid of the dead in another way.
So, like, inherently where my problem lies with this episode, obviously we're going to carry on in a minute, is that the goal of everyone, because we don't really have any character moments of Jaime and Brienne. What was set up before, you literally see them standing back to back with each other, cutting through more zombies. There's a scene where a character is beset by hundreds of White Walkers and they're screaming, and they're all like, all the White Walkers jump on them and pin them to the ground. We then cut away to another scene, we cut back, and that character's absolutely fine. So am I meant to believe that everyone is so proficient in this fight and can just get through it? I didn't believe that at all, but you can't pace a battle with the one goal of, we're just going to keep hacking at the enemy until we've spent all of their numbers.
Look, I mean, I'm one of the people who thinks that they were too safe for their character deaths, and with the character deaths they actually went with in the end, I would have rather if they've gone with the entire cast being wiped out from the north and starting again with newbies in the north and having to go through the rest of the series with maybe like a couple of minor characters having to deal with the ashes. And
honestly, when Dolores Ed died, I thought it was like the K2SO moment from Rogue One, right? Like when he dies, you go, oh, okay, well, now they're going to kill everyone off. That's what I expected them to do. And there's a montage towards the end with a very, very beautiful piano song, actually. Ramin Djawadi, like, what a composer. Again, another moment where I thought, right, this is where everyone effectively, apart from the plot-centric characters, are all going to die. And it really didn't go like that. But I guess we get a break in the action now where Arya goes to the library and we have a more horror-focused section.
This is my second favorite moment of the episode. The tension in this scene was so well done. And it was so well built up. There wasn't any jump scares or anything like that. It was just really, really well-built tension. And a scene where it's not all the hack and slash and stuff like that, and Arya's kind of got herself into a really shit situation. She has to get herself out of it and kind of creeping and crawling around. And it's the one scene where she turns the corner, immediately stabs up with the reaction. Just really, really well done scene.
One of my favorite shots, actually, I think it was directly following this scene. It's where Arya is, we saw it in the original trailer, where she's just running through this labyrinthian series of corridors in the crypts of Winterfell. I loved that. Like, that was great.
And then we get to our second major character death with Beric Dondarrion.
The fact that we said major character death and then followed that up with Beric Dondarrion really speaks volumes for this episode, doesn't it? Did you cry when Beric Dondarrion died? I don't. Like, he's a fine character, but he's not particularly memorable.
He is a character that is memorable for one thing, and that is his sword. And he should have given the sword to Sandor Clegane.
Yeah.
He should have given the sword to the Hound.
When he threw his sword, I think Arya's getting grabbed or something by one of them, and he throws the sword. I was like, go and get the sword. Go and retrieve it. You have literally just thrown away your one weapon. Don't throw a sword. It is pointless.
Instead, I mean, he got stabbed in that scene, and I would say him making it all the way out to the safety hall type thing, that it would have been a better character death if they'd ended that scene a little bit earlier, where he stood there in the doorway just holding it, and getting like he's gripping on as tight as possible as he's getting like
dismembered,
stabbed to death and stuff like that. The fact that he makes it all the way to the almost safe house.
And there's no last word, so there really wasn't any point for him to get to the safe house. You know what I mean? Like, he could have got killed there, and the impact would have still been exactly the same. You mentioned it earlier, though, where he sort of gets the Hound back into the fight. That was a great moment because that was an objective. That was a personal character moment that we'd seen with this progression of Sandor Clegane, and it gave, as opposed to the one objective of let's just keep hacking at zombies, this gave a reason. Right, I need to get back into the battle in order to protect and save Arya. Almost like a father-daughter role dynamic going on with that. That was great.
I've just realized all the people who were talking about their last nights and shit like that in the hall, who were drinking and singing and being knighted together, they all survived.
Yeah. So when Tyrion went, I think we may win due to contrived writing and really poorly written character moments.
Well, no, because what they said was possibly Tyrion, when he spoke to Bran and learnt about Bran, maybe Bran tipped him off that they would get through and he would live.
I've got a question for you right now, and this is sort of going to merge into our next topic of discussion. Who would you say are two of the most intelligent characters in Game of Thrones since the beginning?
Since the beginning, Tyrion...
That feature in this episode. Yep, Tyrion's one of them.
Tyrion, Varys.
Yes, okay. Can someone please tell me why it didn't cross anyone's mind at any point that the fact of hiding out in a crypt full of dead people was not a good idea? Can someone please tell me why that never came up in conversation?
Maybe they thought the bodies would be too old, and I know. I mean, everyone's called it from the weeks beforehand. We all knew that the crypts would not be the safest place
It's
for
stupid.
the women.
What was it? Perhaps now, permit me. Was it perhaps a choice to get a contrived sense of horror when all the bodies are coming in and all the White Walkers are coming in? Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, and this is what I mean. It's slight little things like that. And some people, fair play. Like, if you enjoy this episode, I'm not going to take your enjoyment away. Like, you are perfectly within your right to love this episode and hail it as one of the best Game of Thrones episodes. Some people can look past bits like that and just go, well, that's just a nitpick. You're being too critical. But to me, these little moments, like when you've got so many little moments of little niggles and problems where I'm watching it and I'm actually, as a viewer, going, that doesn't make sense. That character wouldn't say that. That character wouldn't do that. They compound on me, and it just gets to the point where I'm sorry, I can't turn my brain off and just accept it. I have to, have to be very critical on this episode.
One moment that we can both agree was pretty awesome was the re-raising of the dead moment, which leads into the crypt scenes.
Can we talk very, very briefly about the Night King's entrance into this episode?
Yeah, sure.
This was awesome. This was awesome. So when Daenerys, yeah, and he was just like, wee! It like falls into the mist. But then when we get Daenerys and she lands, and I was predicting it, I was like shouting at the screen, like, oh my god, she's gonna, like, if she says Dracarys right now and burns in, this is gonna be the best thing ever. And she did. And then I was watching it and going, oh my god, if the fire clears and he's just still stood there, this is gonna be the greatest thing ever. He did. And it was awesome.
I wanted to just stood there just with a smirk.
He did. He did. Did you see like the little smile creep on his face? I thought that is so cool. And it was such a great introduction to this character. And we see him being proficient in battle. This ultimate like bad guy, this faceless, voiceless guy.
If that moment had happened in series 4, 5, or 6, oh my god, the stakes would have been way higher in this episode.
Yeah.
Maybe they played that card too late. I mean, we knew that they could walk through fire and they could do that. But the fact that he's fireproof is completely like, oh shit.
I liked that they did this here because it was the moment where Daenerys thought, right, finally, we've got the upper hand. We can do this. This is the moment where we can dispatch of our great enemy. And in that one moment, that's like an all hope is lost moment.
Yeah.
The bit where they tee up this feud, and this is going to play very much into my criticism at the very end of this episode. They tee up this awesome. It almost reminded me of. Do you remember the first Hobbit film that came out? An Unexpected Journey. Do you remember the moment at the end where you've got Azog the Pale Orc and Thorin in the burning tree, and they both lock eyes with each other, and it's this great standoff moment? It reminded me of that. You're teeing up this huge, you've got fire and ice right here. This is it. This is like Jon Snow's going to verse the Night King. The Night King's probably going to kick his ass, and he does, and he raises all the dead again, which was a fantastic moment.
I don't know how he got out of that because he was in the middle of the field, but
exactly, and that's another point.
He should have gone halfway and then thought, "Shit, I'm not getting there. I should probably abandon right now."
I thought they were all going to just. What's the word I'm looking for? Not retreat, surrender. I thought this was going to be the moment where, because they all stopped fighting, didn't they? Like the Night King just stood there, rose them all up, and they weren't surging on the people. They had just risen, and he was holding them back. I thought he was going to go, look, this is what you're dealing with. I thought we were even going to have a moment where I didn't know if the Night King would talk, but there's been talk of Jon Snow being the prince who was promised in the book. They're even kind of teasing this, where he's taken one captive to try and get the White Walkers onto his side. Like he's brought the Wildings to his side and joined forces with them. He's trying to do it with the White Walkers as well. I thought there was going to be a moment where they were going to join forces and then surge to King's Landing.
I thought at that moment, Jon would have done one of two things. He would have run, or he would have stood down and just continued going and sacrificed himself to kill the Night King.
I think that how that was built up, I was expecting some kind of a revelation. I was expecting later on in the episode, but I was just expecting something to be dropped here, some big game-changing thing where it's like, whoa, okay, like Claudia says, like, I wanted the Night King to talk as well. I don't know if that would have taken away the threat of his character, but I think it would have added a lot to his character and would certainly have been a surprise to everyone watching the episode. Straight after that, Jon equips his highest item of all, plot armor, and proceeds to run through the entire battlefield unscathed, dodging everything, as does pretty much every other character. Apart from Jorah, who goes out quite considerably in this.
Sure, he has. I mean, every character has their last stand, and there is a moment where it goes kind of the piano kind of cues up and stuff like that. I mean, you've got Jorah making his last stand with Dany, and I swear, and me and my dad are similar thinking on this. I swear I saw Dany throw Jorah in front of one of the swords. It's just no, seriously.
Meat shield.
One of the scenes, she's like, "Ah, help me!" And
I'm gonna have to watch that.
It's just like fucking hell.
I'm gonna have to watch that again. I've got a question. Sorry, just before this because I forgot. Sure. Do you like the decision that Daenerys saved Jon with the dragon in his moment of need? Because the moment that was teed up before, she sees him as an obstacle. She sees him as a threat to her claim to the throne. Would she have saved him, or do you think it would have played more into her character dynamic if she'd have just stood by and watched it happen?
With what scene, sorry?
You know when Daenerys saves Jon Snow, I think all the White Walkers are around him and she like 360 flamethrowers all the White Walkers around him.
Last series.
What, sorry?
Last series or in this series?
In this episode. In this episode that we're reviewing right now. Yeah, she lands and she's on top of Drogon and he like just burns all of the White Walkers around Jon.
Drogon gets stabbed a couple of times.
I think it's that. Yeah, I think it's that scene. But I just don't buy that her character would have done that based on where we saw her at the end of episode 2. I think she would see this as an opportunity.
Maybe next episode is when that kind of, in the heat of the battle, she's just trying to keep everyone alive. And the best way that she can win the battle is with Jon. The best way she can stay alive is by keeping Jon alive.
Jorah's death. Did you like Jorah's death? I didn't think it had much emotional impact. And
I think it was a fitting way to go, but it could have been done better.
I think inherently a lot of my problem is, and this is a cinematic thing. This is more realistic as it would happen. But I think from cinema and because of these characters, and we had the same problem with. Oh, can we say this? No, just for the sake of it, there's a moment towards the end of Endgame where we felt that there wasn't enough impact behind a certain thing that happened based on a lack of dialogue.
Yeah,
I will keep it as vague as possible. And I think the same happened with this scene here. Now, you know, this happens in Lord of the Rings because it's very, you know, it's high fantasy, it's very romanticized, everything like that. A character will be dying on the battlefield, cradled in someone's arms, have this huge, like, emotional monologue before they die, whether it's Boromir, whether it's Theoden. And those moments hit you as a viewer because you're saying, it's almost like you're saying goodbye to this character as the person who's holding them does. With this, it's like someone gets stabbed, they're dead. They're bleeding out, they're dead. Every character that died in this episode doesn't really get any lasting dialogue. You have Dolores Ed instantly killed. You have Lyanna Mormont, who lets out a battle cry, but she doesn't really get any lasting dialogue. Same with Jorah, and you could argue the same with Theon as well later, but at least there's been a significant build-up to his death.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think that's why nothing had an impact on me, but also I understand that it wouldn't be realistic.
We talk about the one death that did have an impact.
Yeah, and then I want to cycle it back to the crypts. So I don't know whether to talk about the crypts now and save the best thing in this episode now.
I also like the crypt scene, and I know you didn't much as well.
No, correction. I like the opening scene of it, when the piano kicks in, the moment with Sansa and Tyrion is incredible. If it had any kind of payoff, someone in the comments. Yeah,
I just want to say the payoff might come in the next episode because I think that they will respect each other now, and even though they say their marriage wouldn't work, and that is mentioned in this episode, I think they will get married nevertheless. Politically,
I kind of do, and you know that I've shipped this since the beginning, and I don't know what that says about me as a person. Last week you said you don't see it happening, and she does have a moment which is very Jack Sparrow, where she goes, "It would never have worked out between us, darling." But she does say, and I hope someone does a meme of this. If not, I'm going to be the guy that's going to make this meme. Yeah. She says, like, it would never work out between us. And he goes, why not? And she goes, well, the Dragon Lady's in the mix. So implying if the Dragon Lady wasn't in the mix, it could happen. And it reminds me of that meme from Dumb and Dumber where he's like, so you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah, I've always shipped it. The scene with them when the piano kicks in, and this was the moment where I thought, right, okay, they haven't really killed any major characters off yet. I thought Tyrion was going to go. In all honesty, I thought this was going to be it. And I can't confirm this, but I was reading a comment earlier on, it was either a Facebook stream or YouTube or something. There was a scene that was cut from this episode again, I can't confirm this. I don't have any citations or anything like that or sources. But apparently, from judging by the comment, what was originally going to happen was you have that moment where he kisses a hand, and it's like it's played up like he is going to like go out there and try and make one last ditch effort. I heard that he snatched the little dagger thing that Sansa had, and he made a fight of it, and he managed to kill a few, and then he hid with the other survivors across the room, but they removed that scene. As the scene is, and please someone tell me in the comments if I missed something, but what payoff did this scene have? You have this immense build-up where you have Sansa and Tyrion hiding behind one of the crypts. They're crying, they're trying to comfort each other. Tyrion kind of gives her a nod like, okay, I'm going out there. And then we next see him, and he's just sort of huddled in a corner with Varys and some women and children, and he's just literally moved to another part of the room, and he's still hiding. Can someone... Is that what happened? Did I miss something?
I'd say that scene didn't have much payoff in itself because the little girl who was meant to defend the crypt did not defend the crypt. She did a really shit job at it, actually.
So many people did sweet FA in this whole episode.
She's just like, one episode before, I'll defend the crypt. Yeah, this episode... Fuck that.
I would like to have seen her die. Is that a bit morbid of me to say that? But do Chris, something at least.
That you wish death on kids.
Oh, so many times you have no idea. Right, let's talk about the best bit of this episode.
I believe in Alfie Allen.
I believe too.
I want to revote on that best Game of Thrones character battle of brackets. He should win.
How many series have you been believing for now, Tate?
Oh, I've been believing since series 1. Even when he had like the absolute shittest time, even when he was being held by Ramsay, I was just like, yeah, he'll make a comeback. You know he will. He's just in it for the bants, really, isn't he?
Yeah.
But honestly, this might be the best character arc in Game of Thrones by a long way. And the fact that he went out in a blaze of glory, the fact that, it was close to him killing the Night King. It was so close. He was the only person who actually went face-to-face in hand-to-hand combat with the Night King. Arya just kind of just stabbed him once and that was it. Like, Theon actually combated the Night King.
I loved the build-up with Theon. I do question what was their plan, because Bran was just kind of there, and he was saying that he's going to chill there to sort of draw the Night King out, which I guess he did after an hour and 20 minutes of an episode. But what was inherently their plan? Like, when he got there, no one was there. Like, Arya was there by pure chance and pure happenstance that she was there. No one had a plan. Like, you would expect them to, like, dig a hole under the ground underneath the Godswood with a dragon there and be like, okay, 3, 2, 1. Night King's here, right? Let's get him. Or something. They didn't really have a plan. I did love how Theon's death was filmed, though. Like, again, this was one that didn't have any dialogue, but, oh, man.
No, it did.
Bran's line.
Yeah. You're a good man, Theon.
That got me.
That's you. And I was just like, oh, it's time. It's time. And having
Theon, though, showing his goddamn archery skills, like Legolas, what? Like, Alfie Allen just takes on, like, this entire army single-handedly.
You have to remember, in Series 1, he was firing arrows.
He's a proficient,
he's a very good archer.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying, that was a payoff. That was a setup.
He was the last man standing. He was surrounded. He's protecting, and this could have gone one of two ways. He could have charged at the Night King in a blaze of glory and got killed as it happened. Another one it could have been was have all of the whites and everything and the White Walkers closing in and Theon just stand there with the spear. Just kind of... But him charging directly at the Night King. No one in Game of Thrones had the balls to do what he did. He didn't even have the balls. He just went for it. And, like, absolutely one of the best character deaths in the show. Although I do think he got stabbed once. There was a second, maybe a minute or so, where I thought he was going to jump up. And when he got stabbed, he was going to take it out and stab back or something like that. Or he was going to have a second knife around the back and just...
I thought it was going to be an Achilles heel kind of thing. Now, actually, first off, I didn't expect that the Night King, this is going to be a big point of contention. I don't know if you liked this. Yeah. We haven't really talked about this. I didn't expect the Night King to die this episode. And I
didn't expect the Night King to die this episode as well.
so many problems with this decision. But if they were going to do it, I think it would have been best to do it with Alfie Allen, because if he already wasn't the real MVP, he certainly would have been after this.
It had to be, in my head, it had to be one of 3 characters to kill the Night King. Jon, because he's the hero, Jaime, because he is the Kingslayer, and Theon, because it would redeem his character completely. Yeah. If there was one person, in fact, who I would think wouldn't actually need to be the one to kill the Night King, a character who is a reasonably badass anyway, doesn't really need to have anything else put up to her, didn't actually need to be there or anything like that, but just for the sake of having the dagger that would be the thing that would kill the deal the striking blow. Arya was the last person on my list. I had Sansa above Arya for killing the Night King first.
Let's talk about... Okay, so let's go with those 4 characters then. Let's go with Jon, Jaime, Theon, and Sansa at a push. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And let's talk about all the story reasons why that would have been more...
so starting off with Jon, he's the hero. It's what he's been fighting for. It's the entire purpose. He's the one who was rallying them all together to kill it. It would have made sense that he was the one who started and finished that journey.
Jaime would have been a beautiful bout of irony with the whole stabbing the king back. Kingslayer, finally, he does exactly the same thing, but saves the day. It would have been a beautiful type.
Well, he's done it twice now. He would have done it twice at that point, because he did save the day. This time he would have been heralded as a hero. Last time he was heralded
and also saving Bran.
Yep, saving Bran.
We pushed out of the window in order to kill in season 1.
It would have been phenomenal. We then move on to who's the next person? Theon.
Theon, yeah.
Theon character arc. He protected Bran after dealing damage to his entire family. It would have solidified him as a Stark, and I'm sure that he'll get a burial in the crypt next episode. He'll get a funeral of some sort. But honestly, character-wise, that would have been phenomenal. Sansa. She's always been this cold, calculating person over the last few series.
No combat experience.
She's no combat experience. She's been the best character this series. What if she was saving her little brother, taking one for the family, putting her house above everything else, or putting herself aside above her house, instead of it playing the Game of Thrones, basically playing the game of life? That would have been phenomenal.
And they'd already set up with Arya giving her the blade, sticking with the pointy end. How perfect, tied up at the end of the episode.
Absolutely amazing. Arya, the reasons why Arya should have killed the Night King: she had the knife, she had the combat skills. That's it.
Yeah.
We could have continued listing candidates. Daenerys could have been a good candidate. Tyrion would have been a good candidate. Even that little kid in the courtyard who said, "I'll defend the crypts," would have been a better candidate than
Arya. Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about the actual event of the Night King now being dead. I'm going to bring in some other fantasy companions, but there's probably a lot of other films that do this as well. But I'm going to explain why I don't think it works in this particular story. Because inherently, winter has been coming for 8 seasons, and it's over in 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And to me, it's so unsatisfying. It's so underwhelming, and it's kind of left me in a position now where I'm really not looking forward to the rest of Game of Thrones, because it feels like this was the story. This was where it was building to.
Question why they didn't kill the Night King off in the last series.
Yeah, it's
because it would have dedicated the last series to just the Game of Thrones instead of it being the Song of Ice and Fire. And I mean, I know it's going to be completely different when it actually gets to the books, but with this, it does puzzle me as to, I mean, first of all, the Night King didn't get south, and there was one theory going online, which was that the Night King wouldn't be there at this battle. They'd think they defeated it, and the Night King would have gone to King's Landing, which is why the throne was frozen in Dany's vision. It's bewildering that he was killed off in this episode, and it's very interesting to see how they play it on.
I'm going to bring up a point. Oh, sorry.
I'm not going to be too judgment forward and say that it's ruined the series for me, but it has subverted my expectations to a questionable mark.
Oh, I've heard that before. Did Rian Johnson direct this episode? I'm going to...
Oh, was it you? Possibly.
Yeah, no, I put that earlier, yeah. I'm really torn on this. I think I'm coming down on the side that I don't like it, though. Okay, so...
We did say one big improvement to the episode, and there was a moment where we all thought it would be when the Night King stands in front of Bran. Imagine if the Night King would have knelt.
Yes, so
That would have been. Oh my god, Bran playing everyone, just playing everyone basically.
I'll talk about this now then before I get into sort of like my deconstruction of the fact that the Night King dies at the end. So
I mean, someone did put up on Reddit, I think it was, that how did the Night King change Craster's babies? By touching them. How did the Night King like put a mark on Bran? By touching Bran. I think there was a couple more comparisons of Night King touching things like to turn people into White Walkers. So it could have been a interesting ending.
The
that way.
music's building. We've had this very emotional, rousing, building piano piece, and we cue up where the Night King has finally reached Bran. He's got to his end, and he just stands in front of him. And I honestly, like, even the bit with Jon Snow, as someone put earlier, I was waiting for the Night King to start talking. Oh, we've lost Tate.
Oh, sorry, I'm back.
Tate has returned. I was waiting for that moment, like earlier with Jon Snow, for the Night King to start talking. And if you follow the theories online, you've seen the theories that Bran is the Night King or he's something in relation to him. I was expecting them to drop this revelation here, and that would have been immense if they'd have done that. This was their one chance to give some kind of character to the Night King, because inherently, and I don't view this as a bad thing. Like a lot of fantasy epics out there, if you break it down to its most basic form, do kind of follow this. Lord of the Rings, it's essentially good versus evil. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more you can read into it than that. But essentially, Game of Thrones plot had, for better or worse, whittled down to, we need to fight the White Walkers. And that was it. Now, to your point where you're kind of okay with the death because you're saying that this show is, you know, it's Game of Thrones. That's the ultimate focus, not this.
I'll be honest, Chris. That's the only way that I can actually come to terms
with it. I would beg to differ with that, because inherently you've got all these people vying for this throne, and throughout this season and the last couple, we've been meant to show that all of that is pomp and circumstance and pointless. The real crisis, the real threat here is this oncoming army of the dead. We need to put aside our differences. We need to forget about this squabbling over a petty thing like the monarchy and band together and deal with this real threat that is very real and is almost here. That was the plot, and that should have been the story. That should have been the final episode. Whether you get to King's Landing and you have some kind of fight with our main characters and Cersei before the White Walkers come in, that's fine, you can do that. Now, my breaking down of this decision to kill sort of like your main antagonist midway through. There are a number of examples I can think of, done very differently in the film, but in the Lord of the Rings book, they destroy the ring, Sauron is defeated. The book then continues till the point where the hobbits return to the Shire, and then we have a new threat. The Shire has been overrun by Saruman and Grima Wormtongue, and it's all been industrialized, and hobbits are now slaves and everything like that. And then they have to deal with that threat, and then everything's over after that, and the Shire's planted. Now, in a movie, you can't really do that because Sauron is your big antagonist. As soon as that's dealt with, end of the world stuff has now finally been reversed. We're good, we're fine. You then can't go on for another half hour and have this lesser antagonist that you need to deal with, because
it almost makes the entire series up until this point feel like a massive side quest.
Yeah, it feels now this has happened. This feels entirely pointless. Another example is one of the best fantasy books ever written, children's book, but The Hobbit. Smaug is kind of touted as your big antagonist bad guy, and he's killed about 3/4 of the way into the book by Bard the Bowman, in some might argue a very anticlimactic way, because then we have to deal with like the whole Battle of the Five Armies and the goblins and joining together and battling with that. But Smaug, who is the main antagonist, some may argue, is dispatched with midway through. Now, I'm more okay with a plot point like that being in The Hobbit, because that is a children's book. It's very episodic, and it's read like a chapter per night. With Game of Thrones, this is what the whole story has been building to this point, since the first scene of season 1. This threat of the White Walkers, this encroaching force, the Night King, this is what we need to stop. Now we've got rid of him in arguably a very anticlimactic way. What are the stakes now? What have I got to look forward to now? Cersei? Okay, but like Cersei's like a force to be reckoned with, but she ain't no Night King and she ain't no Army of the Dead. So is this just, we've got 3 hours of Game of Thrones left, essentially, give or take. Next episode is going to be built.
It's more like 4 or 5 hours, but yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be, right, now we need to take the fight to Cersei and deal with her. And it's like, oh, great, like sure. That's how I feel right now. I don't like it. I really don't like it. Now, on the other hand, Game of Thrones is, well, it used to be, some might say it still is, it used to be a very unpredictable show. You look at the Red Wedding, where you have a character like Robb Stark, who you think is going to be this great hero, this great prestigious hero, and he's just killed in a very offhanded way.
You can't complain the show isn't unpredictable. We all predicted that a lot of people would die in this episode.
They do. They do. Fair enough. So yeah, like some people may see this as a kind of Rian Johnson Last Jedi, and I think this episode might actually be as divisive as The Last Jedi also is. You have your fans that absolutely love it, hail it for every subversion, and then you have people that thinks it's cheaped out on an ending of what it should be. And I think that's going to be the case with this episode. Inherently, we don't know until season 8's done and how it all plays out, but I've got to assume that that's it for the White Walkers now. We've dealt with it. That's done. Yeah. Winter was coming. It's now not. We're all good. Let's just take out Cersei and get the throne for ourselves, and that's going to be it. To me, I don't like that. Like, there are some things in Game of Thrones that subvert your expectations, such as Ned Stark's death, Robb Stark's death, certain happenings on the battlefield that happen here, certain moments with characters that you don't see coming. But to me, this was a step too far. I think this was a big misstep, and maybe by the final episode, episode 6, it will all make sense and we'll all understand why they decided to get rid of the Night King and the entire White Walker army in this episode. As it is right now, I think it was a huge misstep, and I really don't like what they did. Another thing I don't like, and the final thing I'll say on this episode, this trope probably goes all the way back to Phantom Menace. I hate that the entire White Walker army was Phantom Menaced at the end. We knew it was coming. I can't even be mad about it. Like, I knew it was coming as soon as they mentioned that in season 7. You kill the Night King, that will just have a knock-on effect and everything. We've seen it in Phantom Menace. We've seen it in Avengers. Lord of the Rings, you could argue as well, when Sauron's defeated and the ground caves in, all the orcs disintegrate into it. So it's a very neat way to end your episode and tie it up in a neat little bow. But it's a trope that I've never appreciated in movies or TV. So that's kind of my thoughts on the episode, really.
I don't really have any closing thoughts. All I can say is that I enjoyed the episode.
In terms of battle scenes, how would you rank this of what we've seen in Game of Thrones before? Because the main ones, we can't really count Series 1 because they didn't have the budget for it. So you've got Blackwater, you've got the Battle at the Wall, you've got Hardhome, Battle of the Bastards, and I guess that's kind of it, right?
I'll tell you now. I really do like the Battle for the Wall. I really like Watch on the Wall episode. It'd be difficult to rank them. Battle of the Bastards is the best cinematically, but I preferred the Watched on the Wall thematically. Blackwater was better.
That's still my favorite.
Blackwater was better in the books. That's all I can say. And because of that, Battle of Blackwater itself, this battle's better than Blackwater. Battle-wise, it is better than Blackwater.
Scale-wise, it's much bigger. It's louder. It's longer. But
we're talking about best battle here. Yeah. Battle of Bastards #1. Watch the.
I mean, all-round battle episode.
All-round battle episode. I'd probably put this 3rd or 4th.
Blackwater is still #1 in my opinion. The stuff with Tyrion, the stuff with Cersei with the women, with Sansa talking to her as she's getting drunk. The Hound's moment with the fire.
But it was so much better in the books, and we don't really have a book.
It was, but they didn't have the amount of budget at the time to do all that. Yeah. So I thought it was seeing that as like the first big scale battle I'd ever seen on a fantasy TV show or TV in general. That absolutely blew me away, and I still love that episode. And the shot as well with Tywin riding in at the end with his cavalry.
Yeah, you do have to remember, Chris. I was able to see this episode.
This is true. This is a big thing. Maybe when I get this season on Blu-ray, maybe the quality will be better, and maybe I'll be able to make more out of it. But
apologies if my camera looks like it's being directed by J.J. Abrams right now.
We brought all the Star Wars directors into this. Then
I know, right?
Johnson and now J.J. Abrams. It looks beautiful, tape.
Thank you.
Final thoughts on the episode: significantly underwhelmed. I don't think it took anywhere near as many chances as it should. I don't think it was in any way emotionally satisfying, with the exception of one death towards the end. And I really dislike the ending. As I said, we'd been teasing that winter was coming. They did, and it was all over in the span of one episode. I don't think this battle needed to take up an entire episode length. I think that was very much overkill. I think the battle started to lose steam very early on. And what I'm worried about is we had some King's Landing in episode 1, but predominantly we've focused at Winterfell. Now we've got 3 hours to tie this whole thing up at King's Landing with Cersei. I don't think they've distributed their characters out enough. I don't think we've had enough screen time. I really hope it's not a letdown. I don't want this to be an underwhelming ending. But I mean, I was with season 8 up until this point. I had so many high hopes for this episode. And it's not the fact that I was going to compare it to Lord of the Rings. I knew it wouldn't even come close to Lord of the Rings, but even on its own merits, I didn't appreciate this episode. And being the midpoint of the season, it has kind of shaken my faith a little bit in the future of this series. And this is the problem. Like Game of Thrones, when it's good, it's so good. But then they always do something stupid that makes me hate it for a while. And I really hope that they don't keep up with that. The next episode, it's going to be a slow build. Again, it's going to be reestablishing the status quo. It's going to be the characters.
It might end up being like episode 4 from last season, The Spoils of War. We could have something big happen that we weren't expecting.
What I'm concerned about is, though, and I know they've had 2 years wait. Maybe that's just to get all the post-production done. I'm really not sure on why they had the year wait. I fear very much that they've pissed away all of their budget on this one episode right here, which ultimately doesn't have many consequences, which means that we're not going to get like a big finale when we get to King's Landing. And that's really good. If that is the case and they've chose to have this as the biggest episode as apart from the one at the end, that's really going to bother me from a pacing and finale standpoint. Because I think that's, if you're going to have an episode where everything comes to a head and everything's kicking off and you've got, well, we won't have it now, but in my head it was White Walkers, Lannisters, elephants. That would have been the episode to do it. But we'll have to wait and see. Maybe they'll pull something out of the bag. Maybe they'll throw us for a loop. And maybe the death of the Night King will actually have an impact and a knock-on on the rest of the plot. We don't know. So... I've said everything I can on the long night. I knew that I was like going to kind of go on a tirade on this episode, and I kind of did. But although we differ, and like you definitely appreciate this episode more than I did, it still sounds like you had your reservations. Like we come at a sense
I have my reservations, but at the same time, I still enjoyed the episode.
Yeah,
it was a very well shot episode. It could have taken more risks, but I still enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see what the series still has left to show us.
Well, we've got the Greyjoys rocking up again next episode. We've got more Euron, we've got more Cersei, and none of those are a bad thing. So I'm sure I will like episode 4 a lot more than this one. And we had the title, I believe, didn't we, for episode 4?
The Iron Throne, I believe it was.
Yeah, and then there was Aegon's
Conquest, and then you've got...
And then A Song of Ice and Fire is the last one, isn't it? Awesome.
And that's the next episode, is Aegon's Conquest, the episode after the Iron Throne. Those are the names of the episode. So
that'll do it for our review on Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night. Be sure to comment, subscribe. Please subscribe, even though you might disagree with my opinion on this episode. But get your comments in as well, as I said.
Hey, if you disagree with Chris' opinion on this episode, then agree with mine and subscribe for that anyway.
Disagreeing with Chris, it wouldn't be the first time on the channel. So I'm down with it at this point. Please get your comments in as well. If you've got any questions, any fun questions, any speculation for the episode, asking us where we think it's going to go, anything related to Game of Thrones, get your comments in and we'll read them out at the beginning of next stream next week. I believe we're still going to be going for Tuesday next week, aren't we? I think we're still on for that time.
Yes.
Tuesday.
Maybe not. Possibly not.
If we have any changes in schedule, we'll post those on our Facebook and Twitter. Links to those are in the description down below. This week we've got Tolkien coming out, which I'll be going to see, and I'll be getting a review out for that. Much more to come on the channel. So until next review, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.